I never thought my life would be turned upside down by a box wrapped in gold paper and tied with a red ribbon. It looked innocent enough, sitting there on the table beside the birthday cake. The candles were still burning, and everyone was smiling, except me. My hands trembled as I pulled the ribbon loose, something inside me warning that this wasn't just another present. When I lifted the lid and saw what was inside, my heart dropped. A printed ticket, a one-way ticket to a nursing home. I froze. For a moment, I thought it had to be a cruel joke. But then I looked around and no one was laughing. My name is Dolores. I'm 80 years old, and until that day I believed I was still needed, still wanted. I wasn't just someone's grandmother. I was the glue that held our family together, or so I thought. I had spent years babysitting my grandchildren, cooking every holiday meal, giving out advice and loans and love whenever someone needed it. But that night, at my own birthday party, I learned exactly what my children thought of me. They thought I was a burden. They thought it was time to put me away like an old piece of furniture no one wanted, but didn't have the courage to throw out. The room had gone quiet, the kind of silence that swallows you whole. My daughter Clara stepped forward, trying to explain. She said it was for my own good, that the facility was high-end, with nurses on call and social activities for seniors. She said I deserved to rest, to be taken care of. But I wasn't tired. I wasn't asking for rest. I had been fine living in my own home, tending my garden, reading my books, walking to the market every Wednesday. I didn't need a nurse. I needed my dignity. I looked at my son, Marcos, hoping for some sign of disagreement. He avoided my eyes. My grandson, Leo, who used to spend hours playing cards with me, stared at the floor. I was surrounded by people I had loved with every fiber of my being, and not one of them stood up for me. Not one said she should stay. That's when I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. They had talked about this. They had agreed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I put the ticket back in the box, closed the lid, and smiled. A tight, practiced smile that hurt my cheeks. I told them thank you for the party and excused myself. I walked out of my own celebration without looking back. I knew if I did, I'd break. And I couldn't afford to break. Not in front of them. Not after everything I had done for them. That night, I sat alone in my house. The house my late husband and I built brick by brick. I stared at the walls filled with photographs. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. All the milestones where I was the one behind the cake, behind the camera, behind the scenes, making it all happen. Was that all I was now? A faded memory? An inconvenient truth? I poured myself a cup of tea and let the silence wrap around me like a cold blanket. I didn't sleep. Instead, I thought. I replayed every moment, every word, every glance from that party. And somewhere between midnight and morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to the nursing home. I wouldn't let them decide how my story ended. If they wanted to write me off, fine. But I'd be the one holding the pen. I started making plans. Small ones at first. I made a list of the things I still loved. Gardening, books, crossword puzzles, jazz music, lemon cookies, early morning walks. Then I made a second list, a harder one. People I could still trust. The list was short, very short, but it had one name on it that lit a tiny spark inside me. Lucia. Lucia had been my best friend since we were girls. She was the kind of woman who wore bright scarves and red lipstick, no matter the weather. We had drifted apart over the years. Life and family got in the way. But I remembered how fiercely loyal she was. If anyone could help me now, it was her. I called her the next day. My voice shook when I spoke, but she didn't hesitate. She told me to come over, said we'd have coffee and talk. When I arrived, she hugged me like no time had passed. I didn't even have to explain. She already knew something was wrong. I handed her the ticket. She read it, blinked once, then asked, "So, what's our next move?" Those 5 words were like wind in my sails. We sat down and began to talk. Really talk. Not just about what happened, but about who I used to be. Who I still was, under the ache and betrayal. We made a pact, right there at her kitchen table. I wasn't going to that nursing home. I was going to live again, on my own terms. But Lucia had another idea, one that I wasn't prepared for. She said, why not show them what they've lost? Let them see what you're really made of. I asked her what she meant. She leaned in and whispered something that made me laugh out loud for the first time in days. I said, you're crazy. She said, maybe, but it's the good kind. And just like that, we started planning something bigger than I ever imagined. Something that would change everything. Because if they thought I was done, they had no idea what I was capable of. As we sipped coffee and scribbled notes on napkins, something inside me started to wake up. A part of me I thought had gone to sleep years ago. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to come back stronger, louder, and more alive than ever. But we needed time, and a little bit of luck. So we waited. We made lists. We made calls. We laughed like schoolgirls and plotted like thieves. And all the while I kept the ticket tucked in my purse. A quiet reminder of what they thought I was worth. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change again. Only this time, I'd be the one pulling the strings. When you're 80, people don't expect you to make waves. They expect you to shrink, to fade into the background, to quietly accept whatever fate they've laid out for you. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. Not after what they did. I was done being polite. I was done playing the part of the sweet old grandma who bakes cookies and minds her own business. That version of me died the moment I opened that box. What came next was something else entirely. Something they never saw coming. Lucia and I turned her little apartment into a war room. Papers spread across her table, notes taped to the walls, calendars marked in red ink. We weren't just rebelling, we were organizing. She brought out an old box filled with contacts from her days running a local community center. Retired lawyers, activists, even a few journalists she used to know. I was surprised she still had all of it. She winked and said, just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm out of the game. We started with the money. My children controlled most of the accounts since my husband passed. They had convinced me it was safer that way. I had been foolish, trusting. But I still had a few assets tucked away in an account only I could access. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get started. Lucia had a friend named Arnaldo, an accountant with a taste for revenge and a heart of gold. He offered to help, no questions asked. Then came the housing. I couldn't stay in my house. It was too obvious. I needed a new address, something temporary and discreet. Lucia called an old friend who ran a bed and breakfast by the coast. They owed her a favor. Within 2 days, I had a room with a view of the ocean, a fake name on the guest book, and a place where no one would think to find me. I left my house without telling a soul. I packed a single suitcase, took a cab, and vanished. But I didn't leave behind everything. I left a note, one simple line taped to the fridge. Thank you for the gift. I've decided to use it differently. No phone call, no goodbye. Let them wonder, let them panic. For once, they could feel what it was like to be abandoned. At the bed and breakfast, I felt free. For the first time in years, I woke up without obligations, without anyone needing something from me. I walked along the beach every morning, letting the waves erase my anger bit by bit. But I never forgot what they did. That ticket was still in my purse, pressed flat against my wallet like a wound that hadn't healed. I took it out sometimes, just to remind myself why I was doing this. The next step of our plan was harder. Visibility. If I wanted to make a statement, I had to be seen, not just by my family, but by the world. And that's when Lucia had her wildest idea yet. Social media. I had never touched a smartphone in my life, but she showed me how to use hers. We created an account called The Runaway Grandma. The first post was a picture of me on the beach, holding a sign that read, "They gave me a one-way ticket to a nursing home." I gave myself a one-way ticket to freedom. It went viral. Within 3 days, I had 50,000 followers. People started messaging me. Other grandmothers, caregivers, even young people who said they admired my courage. Some shared their own stories of being discarded, silenced, ignored. I read every message. I responded to as many as I could. It wasn't just about me anymore. I had become a voice for something bigger. The media caught on next. A local journalist reached out asking for an interview. I agreed. I told her everything. How I was celebrated 1 minute and discarded the next. How people treat the elderly like glass. fragile, useless, breakable. But I wasn't any of those things. I was still here, still burning, still worth something. The article spread like wildfire. And that's when my daughter called. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. My son sent an email. My grandchildren started leaving messages under my videos. Suddenly they were worried. Suddenly they remembered who I was. But it was too late for guilt trips. Too late for apologies. If they wanted to speak to me, they'd have to wait. Lucia and I laughed over dinner as we watched the numbers climb. But deep down I was shaken. Not because they were reaching out, but because part of me wanted to answer. I hated that. I hated that even after everything. I still longed for their love. For a family that didn't want me back. One night, as we were planning the next post, Lucia paused. She looked at me seriously and said, "Dolores, what happens when they try to bring you back?" I hadn't thought about that. All this had been about escape, about proving I wasn't finished. But eventually they'd come looking, not because they missed me, but because I was making noise. That's when I knew what I had to do next. I had to protect myself, legally, emotionally, financially. I needed distance, real distance. I needed to sever the ties that allowed them to control me. The bank accounts, the medical permissions, the power of attorney. All of it. I wasn't just walking away. I was reclaiming my life. With Arnaldo's help, I began transferring what little was left under my name. We drafted new documents, made notarized declarations, and submitted paperwork to revoke every control my children had over me. It was a long process, but it was worth every signature. I was free now, not just in spirit, but in fact. But freedom came with a price. People began digging into my past. Not just strangers online, but reporters, influencers, even opportunists who wanted a piece of the story. My phone buzzed constantly. I tried to ignore it, but I could feel something building, something I couldn't quite name. And it all came crashing down the day I opened an email with a subject line that stopped me cold. Urgent, legal action notice. They were fighting back. The email was cold, professional, and brutally clear. My children had hired a lawyer. They were claiming I was mentally unfit, manipulated by outside influences, and a danger to myself. The irony nearly made me laugh. I had never been more clear-headed in my life. But there it was, in black and white, an attempt to declare me legally incapacitated. If successful, they could seize control again, freeze my accounts, force me into the very nursing home they'd chosen, strip away everything I had just fought to regain. My hands trembled as I read the words over and over. It wasn't enough to cast me aside. Now they wanted to erase my autonomy altogether. I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken. That they could sit in some lawyer's office, sign documents against me, and still call themselves family. I had raised them better, or at least I thought I had. Lucia was furious. She paced the room like a caged lion, muttering threats and insults in equal measure. She wanted to blast them on social media, expose their cruelty to the thousands who now followed my journey. But I stopped her. Not yet. This wasn't just about rage anymore. It was about strategy, about choosing the battlefield. So we went to Arnaldo. He read the letter, adjusted his glasses, and leaned back in his chair. He didn't sugarcoat it. They had a strong case, not because it was true, but because the legal system rarely favors the elderly when families present a united front. He asked me point blank, "Do you want to fight this?" I didn't hesitate. I said, with everything I have. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, medical evaluations, and paperwork. I had to prove my own sanity. How twisted is that? I took cognitive tests, physical exams, even met with a therapist just to build a record that showed I was of sound mind and body. Every step made me feel more like a criminal than a victim, but I passed them all. One by one, professionals signed their names beside mine, confirming I was lucid, capable, and in full control of my decisions. Still, the case moved forward. My children weren't giving up. They claimed I was being coerced, that Lucia was manipulating me, that the social media presence was a cry for help, not a declaration of independence. They twisted every action into something sinister, I could see their plan clearly now. Discredit me publicly and legally until no one believed my story anymore. But they underestimated one thing. My voice. I still had it. And I wasn't afraid to use it. I made a video. Not just any video. A confession. A timeline. I told the full story. Every insult, every silent dinner, every time they ignored my calls, every small way they made me feel invisible. And then I showed the ticket. I held it up to the camera and said, "This is what they gave me instead of love." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I spoke with calm, measured fury. And the world listened. The video exploded. People weren't just sympathizing, they were mobilizing. Elder rights groups reached out. Lawyers offered pro bono support. News outlets replayed the clip on television. It wasn't just a family squabble anymore. It was a movement. A conversation about aging, dignity, and how society treats its elders. And I was at the center of it. The pressure worked. My children's lawyer dropped the case 2 days later. No explanation. Just a formal withdrawal. I should have felt victorious, triumphant, but all I felt was empty. Because at the heart of all this noise and fire was one unshakable truth. I had lost my family. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. No more messages, no more calls. They had gone quiet. Ashamed? Angry? I didn't know. And honestly, I wasn't sure I cared anymore. I had fought to be seen, to be heard. And now I was. But it cost me something I couldn't replace. One afternoon, while watching the sunset from the balcony of the B&B, Lucia asked me if I regretted it. I thought long and hard before answering. I told her no, because sometimes the only way to reclaim yourself is to burn the bridges they try to build cages on. I didn't light the match, but I wasn't going to stop the fire either. Still, there was an ache inside me, not for my children, but for what I believed we had, for the illusion of love I had held onto for too long. That illusion was gone now, and in its place stood something harder, sharper. Truth. But life has a strange way of offering light when you least expect it. One evening, as I sat replying to a message from a woman in Portugal who had been inspired to leave her abusive retirement home, I got a knock on the door. Not a phone call. Not a message. A real knock. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I would find. And there stood Leo, my grandson. He looked older than I remembered. Taller. Unsure. He didn't say anything at first, just held out a small paper bag. Inside was a lemon cookie, my recipe. I looked at him, and he looked at me. And then he said I didn't agree with them, Grandma. I just didn't know how to stop them. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just pulled him into a hug and let the silence do what words couldn't. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't push. He just said, "I wanted you to know I'm still here." And then he left. That night, I cried for the first time since the party. Not from pain, but from hope. Something was changing, not just in me, but around me. And I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed Leo's visit felt different, softer somehow. The ache in my chest hadn't disappeared, but it no longer felt like it was crushing me. I replayed his words in my head each morning like a lullaby turned mantra. I'm still here. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise, but it was a spark. And when everything else had burned to ash, a spark was more than enough. Lucia noticed the shift in me. She didn't say anything at first, just gave me space to sit quietly by the window or walk barefoot along the beach. But one morning, as we drank coffee with a hint of cinnamon, she asked, "Are you thinking of going back?" I didn't answer immediately, because I wasn't. Not exactly, but I was thinking of something else. Of something bigger than revenge or even healing. I was thinking of purpose. The truth was, I had become someone else in the last few months. Someone braver, someone louder, someone who had inspired strangers across the world to stand up, speak out, and demand better. The woman who cried alone in her kitchen was gone, and in her place stood a storyteller, a symbol, a rebel in pearls and orthopedic shoes. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Then the email came. It was from a woman named Bianca, a producer for a popular online documentary series. She said they had been following my story and wanted to feature me in a full episode, possibly even a mini-series. She said the world needed to hear more, not just about what had happened to me, but about what I planned to do next. And that was the thing. I didn't know what came next. I had spent so much time running from the past that I hadn't truly imagined the future. Lucia grinned when I read her the email. See? You're not just surviving, you're starting something. And I knew she was right. The world was watching. But more importantly, the world was listening. My story had opened a door. I could either step through it or let it close behind me. So I replied. We arranged a video call, and Bianca's face appeared on the screen. A young woman with tired eyes and a genuine smile. She asked thoughtful questions, not just about the betrayal, but about my life before, my marriage, my passions, my fears. She didn't want to turn me into a headline. She wanted to show the world that I was a person, not a punchline. By the end of the call, she said something that struck me deep. Dolores, people don't just want to hear what happened to you. They want to know what you're going to do about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the idea over and over. What was I going to do about it? I had a platform now, a voice, a growing army of supporters. I could just tell my story and fade back into peace, or I could build something with it, something lasting, something that could protect others from going through what I had. I got up and walked to the small desk in my room. I opened my laptop and began typing. The idea poured out faster than I could shape it. A retreat center, not a nursing home, but a sanctuary. A place where elders could live, not wait to die. A place full of gardens and music and laughter, with workshops, community dinners, therapy, legal aid, and education on digital skills. A place run by the elderly, for the elderly. No more institutions, no more shame. Just respect, dignity, autonomy. I called it the second act. When I showed Lucia the draft, she cried. We called Arnaldo. He said it was ambitious, maybe even impossible, but he didn't say no. Instead, he introduced me to a network of retired professionals, engineers, architects, fundraisers, who were eager to help. Some had even been following my story online. One woman, an 82-year-old former attorney named Teresa, offered to help draft the nonprofit charter. Word spread like wildfire again. Donations trickled in, then poured. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. A woman in Canada sent $5,000. A man in Argentina sent a message offering land. People were hungry for change, and they believed in me. But not everyone was thrilled. I began receiving anonymous messages, emails telling me to go quietly, comments accusing me of exaggeration, of lying, of seeking fame. My children didn't speak publicly, but I could feel their disapproval radiating from the silence. I wondered if they had seen the interviews, if they knew about the retreat, if Leo had told them anything. One night, I got a private message from an unknown account. It read, "You've made your point. Now stop." I stared at it for a long time. I could have let fear take root. I could have shut everything down, disappeared again. But I didn't. Because I remembered the look in Leo's eyes when he said he was still here. And I knew. I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I was doing it for every person who'd ever felt tossed aside, silenced, erased. So I didn't stop. We found a location. A rundown school in a quiet countryside town surrounded by trees and hills. The local government agreed to lease it to us for a symbolic fee. We had volunteers ready to help renovate, designers to adapt the space, therapists willing to work for free. It was really happening. And then came the call I never expected. Leo again. He said, "Grandma, they know. They're angry, but I think Mom's having second thoughts." I didn't answer. He continued, "She watches your videos. She doesn't comment, but she watches. I heard her crying once. My heart twisted. Old wounds have deep roots, and sometimes the deepest pain comes from hope that refuses to die. But I didn't want to go back, not to the way things were. I wanted to move forward. So I said, tell her I'm still here too, but she'll have to walk the rest of the way herself." Weeks passed, and with each passing day, the second act began to take shape. The old school building was transformed one room at a time. Volunteers arrived with paint buckets, hammers, and hopeful hearts. Retired carpenters worked alongside young architects. Former teachers offered to run reading clubs and writing workshops. Every brick, every brushstroke felt like healing, not just for the building, but for me. We were building more than walls. We were building dignity. I took morning walks through the construction site, my fingers trailing along the new door frames, imagining laughter echoing through the halls. One room was being turned into a dance studio. Another would become a garden atrium. We designed a library filled with large print books, audiobooks, and digital readers for those who needed them. No one would feel left out. No one would be forgotten. One morning, as I watered a row of lavender plants in the courtyard, a voice called my name. I turned, and there she was. Clara, my daughter. She looked nothing like the composed, superior woman who once handed me a nursing home brochure. Her hair was pulled back messily, her eyes red and tired. She held her purse with both hands like a shield. Behind her, Leo stood silently, watching. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I said calmly, "You found me." She nodded but didn't speak. Instead, she looked around. Her eyes lingered on the garden beds, the wooden benches, the construction scaffolding. Then she looked back at me and said, "It's beautiful." I didn't know how to respond. I waited, let her carry the weight of whatever she had come to say. "I saw your video," she said. "All of them." I crossed my arms, guarding my chest like I had learned to. "Then you know why I left." "I do," she said quietly. "And I understand now. At least I think I do." There was pain in her voice, but also something else. Something uncertain and raw. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she continued. "We thought we were protecting you. We thought you'd be safer, cared for." "No," I cut in. "You thought I was inconvenient. You thought it was easier to file me away than ask me what I wanted." Her shoulders dropped. She didn't argue. "I was scared," she whispered. "You started forgetting things. You left the stove on once. You skipped your pills." I looked away. She wasn't wrong. But fear doesn't justify betrayal. And instead of talking to me, I said, "You made decisions for me. Decisions I wasn't even allowed to be part of. Do you know how humiliating that is? To open a gift and realize it's your family, telling you that you don't belong anymore." She blinked, tears brimming but not falling. "I didn't realize I didn't know it would hurt you like that." I gave her a long look. "Then you didn't know me at all." Silence stretched between us. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rosemary and fresh earth. She stepped forward. "I want to help," she said. "Not just with you. With this place. With what you're building." It hit me like a wave I wasn't ready for. My first instinct was to reject her, push her away the way she had done to me. But I didn't, because Leo's words echoed again in my mind. She's having second thoughts. I said, "You don't get to help to ease your guilt. This isn't your redemption arc." She nodded. "I know. If you help, it's because you believe in it. Because you believe in what I'm doing. Not because you want me to forgive you." Clara hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a check. A donation. Significant. She held it out. "I believe in it," she said. I didn't take it. I let her hold it there between us. An offering, waiting for judgment. "I'll think about it," I said. That night I sat with Lucia on the porch, the sky painted with stars. "Are you really going to let her help?" she asked. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "I want to, but I'm afraid." "Of what?" "That if I open the door again, she'll close it the moment I become inconvenient." Lucia was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "People can change, Dolores. Sometimes too late. Sometimes just in time." The next day, Clara returned. She didn't speak, just rolled up her sleeves and joined the volunteers sanding down old doors. She worked all morning. No complaints. No drama. At lunch, she sat alone. No one forced her to earn forgiveness. She was earning her place. Over the following weeks, she kept coming back. Slowly, carefully, she became part of the community. She helped draft the medical care protocols. She arranged for local musicians to donate their time. She even started leading yoga classes for arthritis patients. The residents loved her. I kept my distance, watching. And then one afternoon, I found a small notebook left on the bench in the garden. It had Clara's name on it. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, ideas, worries, memories. On the last page, she had written, "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me, but I want her to know I'm learning. Every day. because she deserves more than what we gave her. I closed the book and sat quietly. Sometimes the past knocks softly, and sometimes it walks beside you in silence, hoping you'll notice it has changed its shoes. The day the documentary aired, everything changed again. It wasn't just a simple upload to the internet. It was a full premiere. Bianca and her team had gone all in. Polished editing, a haunting piano score, and interview snippets that painted a vivid, emotional timeline of everything I had endured. From the betrayal of that birthday party to the rise of the second act, it was all there. My tears, my anger, my fight, my voice, raw and unwavering, telling the world what it feels like to be discarded by the people you raised. Within hours, it was trending worldwide. People from every corner of the globe flooded our inbox. Donations surged. Volunteers doubled. Celebrities reposted clips with messages of solidarity. Someone even started a hashtag, #AdNotDoneYet. It took on a life of its own. Stories from other elders began pouring in, some heartbreaking, others full of triumph. I read each one like a prayer. They reminded me why I'd started all of this, why I couldn't stop. But with attention comes scrutiny. The media requests became relentless. Morning shows, podcasts, magazine features. Everyone wanted a piece of Grandma Dolores. I could feel the line between my story and my identity beginning to blur. I was no longer just a person, I was a symbol. And symbols don't get to rest. I tried to stay grounded. I walked the halls of the second act every morning, greeting the new residents, checking on their projects. We had musicians, painters, gardeners, people rediscovering joy after years of invisibility. I reminded myself that this was the mission. Not fame, not headlines. Dignity, choice, community. But then the vultures came. An influencer I'd never met posted a video claiming I was exploiting my age for attention and donations. He called me a granny grifter, said my story was too clean to be true. His words went viral. And just like that, the tide began to turn. Comment sections filled with doubt. Were the videos staged? Were we pocketing the money? Was Clara secretly orchestrating the whole thing? I was furious and hurt. Mostly hurt. I didn't know anyone proof of my pain. I didn't fabricate that ticket. I didn't invent the silence of my family when I needed them most. But now I was being asked to defend my truth all over again, as if survival needed an alibi. Bianca called frantic. We can issue a statement, set the record straight. We'll release the raw footage, the financials. No, I interrupted. Let them talk. Because something had shifted in me. I wasn't here to win everyone over. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to fight for something that mattered. And no hashtag, no angry video, no cynical stranger could take that away from me. Still, the pressure built. One night, after a particularly cruel article was published, suggesting Clara had manipulated the narrative to restore her own public image, I found her crying in the kitchen. Not the dramatic kind of crying, the quiet, defeated kind, the kind that sinks into your bones. I didn't ask for any of this, she whispered. I just wanted to make things right. I sat beside her. I know. They're saying I only came back because of the cameras, that I'm still using you. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was thinner than before, tired, but present, and trying. They don't know what I know, I said gently. Let them scream. You just keep showing up. And she did. We pressed forward. A retired judge volunteered to audit our finances and publish a public report. Every dollar was accounted for, every receipt saved. The report silenced most of the doubters, but not all. Some people will always want a villain, and if they can't find one, they'll invent one. That's when I realized something else. I didn't want to be a martyr. I didn't want to be the face of a movement built on grief and outrage. I wanted to be part of something living, something joyful. So I made a choice. I stepped back, not entirely, but enough to breathe. I handed more responsibilities to Clara, to Lucia, to the other residents who had become leaders in their own right. And then, for the first time in months, I went home. Not to the house they tried to send me away from, not to the past, but to the little cottage by the sea. I had fallen in love with the moment I stepped foot in it. I brought a few books, a radio, and a box of lemon cookies someone had baked using my recipe. I didn't check my phone for days. I just existed. It felt like recovery, like reclaiming not just my story, but my silence too. I watched the waves. I listened to the gulls. I let the wind untangle the noise from my thoughts. And in that stillness, I found clarity. This wasn't just about what they had done to me. It was about what I chose to do next. And that next step would come sooner than I thought. Because one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a letter in the mail. A real letter. Handwritten. The return address was unfamiliar. I opened it, heart steady. And there, in looping cursive, were the words, "Dolores, I think I'm your sister." I read the letter 3 times before I let myself believe it was real. "Dolores, I think I'm your sister." The handwriting was neat but shaky, like someone who hadn't written much in a long time. Her name was Estella. She said she had been searching for me for years, always wondering if I was still alive. She'd seen my face in the documentary and nearly dropped her cup of tea. The shape of my eyes, the curve of my smile. It was like looking into a mirror from 60 years ago. She had no doubt. She said she was my father's child from a second marriage I'd never known about, a secret half buried in time. I sat there on the porch with the letter pressed against my chest, the sea roaring in the distance like it already knew everything I was feeling. Shock, confusion, a strange, reluctant hope. Could it be true? After everything that had been torn apart, was something being sewn back together? I called Arnaldo the next morning, not because I didn't believe her, but because I needed to be sure. He promised to look into it discreetly. Meanwhile, I wrote Estella back. I kept the letter short, cautious but kind. I told her I had questions. I told her I wasn't sure how to feel. And I told her I wanted to meet. 2 weeks later, I stood on a train platform, holding a bouquet of wildflowers I had picked myself. My heart thudded in my chest like it hadn't in years. Every sound around me, footsteps, wheels, birdsong, was louder than usual. Sharper! And then, through the crowd, I saw her. She was tall and slender, wearing a straw hat and a long navy coat. Her hair was white and curly, and her eyes were exactly like mine. When she smiled, I knew. It was her. We didn't speak at first, just hugged, long and tight, like a lost part of me had finally been returned. When we finally pulled apart, she whispered, "You look like our mother." I didn't correct her. I didn't say my mother. I just nodded. Because maybe, in some way I didn't understand yet, we both shared something more than blood. We spent the day talking. Her story unfolded slowly. How her mother had met our father years after I was born. How she grew up hearing whispers about another daughter. How she'd always wondered, always hoped. She had children, a small house in the countryside, and a love of painting. She brought a tiny canvas with her, a portrait of what she imagined I looked like. It was almost perfect. The next few days felt like a dream. We walked along the beach, shared stories, and filled in gaps in each other's lives. I told her about the second act, about Clara, about Lucia, about everything I had built after the collapse. She listened intently, eyes wide with wonder and pride. She said I had turned pain into purpose, that she was proud to be my sister. When she visited the second act, the residents welcomed her like family. Clara, ever gracious, offered her tea and gave her a tour. Estella cried when she saw the garden. "This is what every elder deserves," she whispered. But with every beautiful moment, I felt a weight building inside me. A question I hadn't dared to ask. Why now? Why had this secret been kept from me for so long? One evening, as we sat beneath the stars, I finally spoke it aloud. Why didn't anyone tell me I had a sister? Estella looked away for a long moment. Then she said, "Because your mother made our father promise. She didn't want anything to divide her family. And he chose silence over conflict. It stung, deeply, to know I had been robbed of decades with someone who might have understood me in ways no one else could. But I also understood. Families are messy, full of half-truths and silent wars. Maybe my mother had done what she thought was right. Or maybe she just couldn't bear the thought of sharing what was hers. We didn't dwell on it. There was no point now. We had the present. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged to something real. Estella offered to help with the retreat. She had ideas for art therapy sessions, and her daughter was a nurse interested in geriatric care. The family I didn't know I had was now weaving itself into the one I was rebuilding, slowly, gently, like a tapestry being mended after a long tear. Then, one day, Clara approached me with an envelope. Her face was calm, unreadable. "I think it's time," she said. Inside was a document, a resignation. She was stepping down from the leadership board of the second act. "You don't trust me yet," she said softly. "And that's okay. I'll earn it another way. This should always be your story." I didn't stop her. I didn't beg her to stay. I let her go, because she was right. This was my story. I sat alone that night in the main courtyard, watching the string lights flicker above the tables. Around me, residents laughed and danced to a live jazz trio. Someone handed me a lemonade. Somewhere a dog barked playfully. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel old. I felt alive. I didn't know what came next, whether I'd ever fully heal, whether I'd forgive everyone, or anyone. But I knew this much. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. Because when the world gave me a one-way ticket to the end, I tore it in half and wrote my own beginning. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It started with betrayal, but it became a journey of self-worth, resilience, and the power of starting over. At any age, I turned heartbreak into purpose and built a place where dignity isn't a luxury, but a right. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who's ever been underestimated, ignored, or cast aside. I hope my story reminds you that your second act can begin whenever you decide. If you read to the end, drop a comment below saying I'm still here so I know you made it. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters.